Homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to the courageous warrior Manjushri, homage to great lineage masters. In order to receive the teachings of Tathagata, let's then give rise and aspiration to the Supreme Bodhicitta. So let's continue with the class of the Supreme Mahayana teaching of the Shrangama Sutra. Since the beginning of giving the teaching of the Shrangama Sutra, in fact, what I observed is that I think people have increased their devotion towards this teaching, and I'm quite satisfied with it. And I saw lots of people who are engaging in the diligent studying of this. The pre-class and after class, I see that lots of people would prepare for this class to read into commentaries and prepare, as well as after class discussion groups and so on. There are people who only listen to the class, and there are people who sometimes listen and sometimes don't. Anyhow, I can't require everyone to be of the high capacity in terms of studying the Dharma. Anyhow, I really encourage those of you who are listening to this class as well as studying the Dharma in general to be patient. Do not give up because of other people's saying. You only listen to how other people would ask you whether if you've gained some insights or not through listening to one or two classes. Don't do that. In fact, during the course of studying, you probably feel that you have to spend lots of effort and energy, and that's normal because studying is a course of hardship, and some hardships like this is worthy of going through, because after studying and after understanding lots of such knowledge, your understanding and the way that the Dharma would change your mind stream is completely different. And compared to the benefit that you can receive to the hardships that you go through, I think the hardship is really nothing compared to such great benefits that could create to you. Master Qing Liang, who in fact taught the sutra for in fact a long period of time. He teaches about 8 hours a day, and he lived till about over 100 years old, 102, I think. And Master Meng Can, who in fact passed away about 2 years ago, he gave teaching on the Avatamsaka Sutra for 482 classes, and in total 668 hours, 662 hours. If you were to think that, if you were to contemplate upon engaging and making commitment to listen to 482 classes, how do you feel? Would you be able to make such a commitment? In fact, we're not going to have 482 classes on the Shrangama Sutra. We're probably going to have about over 100 classes or so. So it's really nothing compared to the 482. There are people who give all kinds of excuses. They would say that they have to go out to travel with family and friends, to then have gatherings and to see friends and to have different kinds of family chores and work engagement and so on. So they have all kinds of excuses of not listening to the class. Of course, I'm not asking you to completely give up your family life and home and lay practitioner's life, but let's just contemplate upon this. In fact, we only have 2 classes per week on the Shrangama Sutra, and it takes up about 4 hours maximum for these classes. So upon contemplating the time compared to the time you engage in other worldly things, then I think it is reasonable to ask you to spare this time just solely to study the Dharma. In fact, I myself have lots of important things to do, and more important. I have also important things to engage myself in, but I think what you do and what you do not do, the kind of choices that you make, really says a lot about your intention and what is the most important to you. When we're talking about the Shurangama Sutra, I really hope that you have the time to go over and look into different kinds of commentaries. There are great masters' teachings and commentaries that's recorded and written down and published. I really think those kind of teachings are worth to read into. I read that there was a book that's called The Stories of the Noble Ones of the Shurangama Sutra. In fact, it was a professor from Huafan University from Taiwan, and he made a collection of this stories of people who attained realization and insights through reading Shurangama Sutra. In fact, we often talk about how Avatamsaka Sutra and the Lotus Sutra brings insights and realizations and liberation to many people, but the number of people who gained liberation and realization through the Shurangama Sutra surpass in number than those of the previous two sutras. And I know that there are many different commentaries. For example, from the Yuan dynasty, there was a Weizi master. He's a Zen master, and he made a collection of the commentaries of the Shurangama Sutra. And within this collection of commentaries, he collected 9 masters' commentaries. So this compilation of commentaries is in fact quite rich and really important to read into. And another one, there was a master whose name is Zen Master Chuanden, and he made a collection of teachings of the Shurangama Sutra as well. Also, Master Zibo. And he also then wrote into the comment. He also wrote an commentary that is well received and very much renowned in its profundity. So, I can list a whole list of great masters who placed a great importance in the Shurangama Sutra. Such like this. All these kind of commentaries I really encourage you to read and study. Many great masters, the way they make comments, they explain this Shurangama Sutra, in fact, they are quite similar. I heard that many people, in fact, found one particular commentary and felt that I only taught throughout that one commentary. That's not true. I read through the Tibetan translation as well as the Chinese and many different commentaries. But what I noticed is that the previous masters really have a very similar explanation. So through your own wisdom, as well as the wisdom of the previous masters, I think you can then observe yourself whether you can understand the profound meanings that is included in this Shurangama Sutra. Even if you cannot understand the most profundity of this sutra, at least you should understand what does this Shurangama Sutra talks about. The Avatamsaka Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, as well as the the Shrangama Sutra, in fact, are the three most well-known and most renowned sutras in the Chinese mainland area. And lots of people also know that in this sutra there is the story of Ananda and Matangi, a woman from the Matangi caste. So only knowing these kind of stories is not enough. In fact, I really feel that it is necessary for us to do lots of deep research and focus the research in particular sutras and shastras. And after yesterday's class, I heard lots of people who made the aspiration to then study and to engage in research. I think by doing so, in fact, you are doing a favor to yourself and you're making your life really meaningful. And after you study for a long period of time, then you can write rather a very full and very complete commentary as well. Let's just look at the previous master's commentary. There's so many masters who taught on this, who then wrote commentaries on the Shrangama Sutra and so on. But how about the modern people? I haven't heard for a long period of time whether there are anyone who's giving teaching on the Shrangama Sutra. So let's think about this, contemplate up on why that we have more and more people, we have more and more technological advancement and more dualistic thoughts, but why is that we have less and less commentaries and less wisdom? So this is something to really worthy of our contemplation. Just as yesterday's story that the old monk said that I only heard of reciting the sutra, not the teaching of the sutras. In fact, I think that's really the truth of what is happening nowadays. I heard lots of people who would then chant and read the sutra, but not teaching the sutra. If you don't give the teaching of the Dharma, then if you don't give teaching of the Dharma, who can understand the Dharma? So this is quite important to give teachings of the Dharma. And that's what I want to talk about it before the actual class. Now let's move into the actual class. Yesterday we talked about the Arhats and Bodhisattvas. They all gathered around after the summer retreat. So they all then gathered around the vihara. Also, Manjushri was there. Meanwhile, King Prasannaji, who was keeping the anniversary for his father's death by offering vegetarian food to him. So, Prasannaji, we've heard this name a lot for many times. In fact, this name means king of the moonlight. And Shakyamuni Buddha, in fact, had the same birth date with Prasannaji, and Shakyamuni Buddha was called the king of sunlight. So Prasannaji was keeping the anniversary for his father's death. The anniversary for his father's death is rather not so clear in the Tibetan version, but in the commentary where it says that the anniversary for his father's death means the open festival. It is at the last day of the summer retreat, or rather, the last one of the 3 last days. Also, it is said on the lunar calendar on July the 15th. So that was the date, and on that day, the king Prasannaji invited the Sangha also, it is said that he invited all the Sangha on the second day as well, which is July 16th on the lunar calendar. The Open Festival is known as the anniversary for then honoring the deceased ancestors and families and relatives and so on. Anyhow, the original story of Open Festival, in fact, comes from Modigalayana. In fact, he, through his ominous power, perceived that his mother is suffering in the hungry ghost realm, some said in hell realm. Anyhow, he perceived that his mother was suffering over there, and he wanted to gift his mother some food because his mother was starving, but his mother could not then receive the food. Therefore, Modigalayana went to the Buddha and asked what he should do. Then the Buddha gave the teaching of the Open Festival, and there's a sutra on the Open Festival. And then through the teaching as well as offering the food to Modigalayana's mother, his mother got liberated. Open, the word open, what it means is that it's hanging upside down. In one of the realms of the three lower realms, it is said that they suffer a lot where they would hang upside down and suffering greatly. So it means hanging upside down. And then let's go back to the story. So at that time, King Prasenajit then came personally to invite the Tathagata to the inner palace for a royal feast. In the Tibetan version, it means that he invited the Tathagata to the palace, and he went to invite the Tathagata personally and invited them for a royal feast of best and rarest delicacies, to which he also invited the great bodhisattvas in the assembly. He also invited the great bodhisattvas, including Manjushri and many great bodhisattvas. After inviting them, he also invited the elders and lots of lay practitioners or the devotees. In fact, the elders, what it means that is there are the elders who are elders because of their age, because of their wealth, because of their fame, because of their lofty position, because of their wisdom. Anyhow, so those kind of elders, those kind of lay practitioners, or the ones who are the patriarchs. In the city, the elders and devotees also offered food to the members of the order and reverently waited for the Buddha's arrival. So all of these people heard that Prasenajit was then hosting a feast for the Tathagata as well as his disciples over there, the great assembly, including bodhisattvas and arhats. And then this group of people also wanted to make offering on that special date, on that auspicious date. So there are lots of the new learners and the arhats and bodhisattvas, all of them. And they prepared for all different kinds of meal and waited for the Buddha to come and receive the offering. In some Theravada tradition countries such as Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, and Myanmar, in fact, they still have such kind of tradition of making offering of the meal. In fact, this kind of offering is rather a bit different than those of the Chinese Buddhism as well as the Tibetan Buddhism. But being different doesn't mean that it's wrong, because being different only means that Buddhism adapted to different regions in terms of their customs and their patterns of living. So according to Vinaya, according to the four sects of the precepts and so on, in fact, there are some slight differences, but not of the greatest difference. Even those kind of differences are not the most crucial, because it is based on the changes of the different people, different time, and different situations. Anyhow, we cannot take that what's being different as being wrong, because if you were to take it in such a way, then it would rather be very difficult for lots of things to carry on, including our mundane life. So we should use our wisdom to differentiate different kind of situations. So at that time, then Shravasti, the city, was in fact quite busy. Lots of people were all gathered, and they really cherished such opportunity to see the Buddha face to face, to see the great Manjushris face to face. So we can imagine those people must have lots of great merit to see them face in face. Over here it says that commanded by the Buddha. Saying that Manjushri took the Bodhisattva and Arhats to the royal feast, saying that, okay, Manjushri Bodhisattva, you should ask the Bodhisattvas and Arhats to then group by group to different doors and to different households, and not only to the palace. In fact, other than the king's palace, there are the homes of the Brahmins, of the elders, and the devotees or lay practitioners. So lots of people all prepared meals for all of these assembly. When Phuntsok Rinpoche and I went to Hong Kong, at that time there was an old monk in Poyo Center. And we stayed there for a little while. That old monk, in fact, has already passed away. And at that time, that old monk always would come to Phuntsok Rinpoche and say that, well, I have a good news. Someone offered meal to us. And the second day, he would say, I have another good news. So and so offered a meal. And Phuntsok Rinpoche would joke with us and say that, does that old Lama have good news for us today? On one day, the old monk was not really happy. And Phuntsok Rinpoche secretively told us that maybe today no one offered food to us because he doesn't seem too happy. And it turned out to be true, in fact. Anyhow, Manjushri, in accord with the request of the Buddha, he took the Bodhisattvas and Arhats to the royal feast. At that time, there were 1,250 bhikshus. Nowadays, it is that all the people who want to offer the meal would come over here and offer the meal. But at that time, it was rather the whole assembly would then separate into groups and go into different places to receive meal. And if this whole event is not organized well, then there could be people who receive too many people but don't have enough food, and people who then prepared meal and offering to the Sangha but did not receive anyone. Also, on top of that, there was no cell phones and so on at that time. Therefore, it must be very difficult to organize this kind of event. So Ananda, who is the main character over here, who is Ananda? Ananda in Tibetan means Gangawu, which means all are joyous. Why is his named? Why does he name has such a name? According to some Vinaya teachings, it is said that the first reason that Ananda is joyous because in his previous life, Shakyamuni Buddha then made a aspiration that his father's predicted his father's name and his attendant's name, which included Ananda. And the second one is that he is really good looking, and therefore he is quite joyous to look at, joyful to look at. And then the third one is that when Shakyamuni Buddha got enlightened, Ananda then was born. So Shakyamuni Buddha was enlightened, Ananda was born. That's why Ananda is named in such a way. He had not come back from a distant engagement. In Tibetan translation, in fact, it didn't specify what it means. But in the Chinese commentary, what it says is that Ananda, in fact, have accepted a special invitation earlier. So a special invitation and a general invitation, they're different. A special invitation is inviting someone in specific, and the general invitation is inviting the assembly. Whomsoever comes, they would make offering. There are people who would make specific invitation to the ones who are either having special realization or have some kind of special connections. Anyhow, Ananda at that time, he accepted a special invitation from rather quite a distance, from where the Buddha was. And then Ananda probably only went there to receive the offering of either clothing or something else, but not really food. So he was returning to the vihara alone, without his superiors or his acharya. He didn't receive any food, because he was really far away. So he didn't join the whole assembly to receive the offerings from the people in Shravasti, the city of Shravasti. Because he went out alone. In fact, according to some of the Vinaya teachings, it is said that the bhikshus and bhikshunis, in fact, the bhikshunis should not go out alone. But for the monks and Shravaka, for the monks, then they can, especially the novice, then they can go out alone. But it is said that if a monk would go out, they'd better go out with a group, with someone else. Over here, what does the superior or the acharya mean? There are 3 types. The ones who have rather accepted or received the precepts for a much longer time than himself and than the student himself. And the other one is that whomsoever have more superior and higher level of merit and wisdom. And for example, there are the ones who probably who are not as senior as those of people who received the precepts for a long period of time, but they've made a great contribution to the monastery. And another one is the ones who have already attained arhathood and realized the nature of dharmata. Sometimes they are then talked separately. For example, the years or the time of receiving the precepts and the time of being ordained. There are different ways of distinguishing this. So those are the superiors. And the second one is his acharya. So none of those are with Ananda. Anyhow, acharyas, there are a few types. For example, there are the acharyas who then ordained, who give the ordination, and there are the acharyas who then transmits the precepts. And acharya upon whom others may rely, who then have the full, who upholds the full precepts. It is the best that if one could rely upon such kind of acharya for 10 years. There's another one who says that it is the acharya who transmits the teachings, giving the teachings of what to uphold and what to abandon. So Ananda have not received such 5 kinds of acharya. So he was returning to the vihara alone, and then went to different places and trying to beg for alms from different places. It was difficult for him to beg for alms. So he was quite hungry without receiving any food. Ananda was the attendant of the Buddha. And at that time, I think lots of people would make offering to Ananda. But according to the precepts, it is said that, according to Vinaya, it is said that Ananda has quite a few uncommon characteristics. First of all, is that Ananda was the relative of the Buddha. Also, he had been the attendant of the Buddha for 20 years. So all the way between the Buddha's enlightenment till his passing. So at that time, in fact, he could receive lots of gifts from others. And he has this characteristic that he doesn't receive other people's gifts. He doesn't receive other people's offering of food and clothing. I think this is quite important. Nowadays, lots of people, lots of the lamas, they have some relatives, and the relatives would be very arrogant, and then they would receive gifts from the devotees. I think this is not appropriate. And the other one is that, oh, I am an attendant of a certain teacher, therefore you should give me something, give me some gifts. In fact, I really feel that being an attendant, that is not an appropriate action to uphold. In fact, it is quite a serious action. Some teachers, they have pure precepts. Some they have great knowledge. They have a very pure and simple living. But then attendants, they would go out, and the attendants, they would go out and say that, oh, I know what that teacher needs. That teacher needs so-and-so medicine. That teacher needs so-and-so clothing, and so on. I think this is really terrible, because it's very difficult. It is rather very inappropriate for an attendant to spread such kind of messages to others, to beg for things from others. Let's look at Ananda. Ananda won't seek for things and alms from others with the name of the Buddha. Therefore, the lay practitioners, the attendants, the monastics who are around the teacher, then I really hope that the people who are close to the lamas should not spread such kind of message to beg for alms for the lama, because I think it is quite it could create a difficulty for the lama, in fact, instead of creating favorable conditions. So for those of you who have good connections to the people who are close to the lama, I think it is best that you do not spread any kind of rumors. You do not then talk behind the back of the lama and create obstacles for the lama's activities. So whomsoever you are, whatever or whomsoever the disciple is, do not use the name of the lama to benefit yourself. Sometimes, even if you're not trying to benefit yourself, but it is quite important to make sure that you make sure that it is appropriate to say something and appropriate not to say something. Because if you are not being skillful, sometimes the actions and speech could create certain kinds of difficulties and rumors for the lama. Otherwise, from other people's eyes, from your speech, I think it would make others of not having any devotion or faith towards the lama, and it may even feel that the lama lacks morality than those who are mundane people. So Ananda really understood the Buddha's teaching and what the Buddha wants. So in terms of propagating the lama, or you're trying to help the lama, especially when it comes to wealth, I think it is quite important to think again and again before you say anything and do anything, because what you do or say may not create benefits or favorable conditions to the Lama, and it could even create obstacles for the Lama. So that's the second characteristic. The next characteristic is that Ananda received the 12 volumes of teachings from the Buddha, and he has perfect memory. It is said that the Buddha has poured all his wisdom from his vase into the vase of Ananda completely. So all the wisdom of the Buddha, in fact, poured into the vase of Ananda, although Ananda at that time did not receive the realization of arhathood, but Ananda was able to memorize perfectly all of the teachings of the Buddha. That is why the Buddha, at the time of him entering into parinirvana, and everyone wanted to then receive the lineage or being the lineage holder of the Buddha, but the Buddha said that Ananda should be the one who should continue this lineage of the Dharma, because he completely understood my teaching. And from the characteristic point of view, from the way of being a good person, Ananda was completely and devoid of arrogance. Ananda was quite humble. Unlike those of people who are close to certain lamas, they're quite arrogant nowadays. So for mundane beings, in fact, these kind of characteristics are worthy of us to study as well. So Ananda is actually quite a great practitioner. Why is it important to talk about the story of Ananda and Matangi? According to Master Hanshan's commentary, where he explained, although he did not explain word to word in the Srangama Sutra, but he explained the most important part, where, for example, why this story is why this sutra opened up with this story, because in our world, in fact, it is difficult for the human beings to surpass the licentiousness, and even Ananda, who is a great practitioner, cannot surpass such kind of desire. And it is because of the Buddha's blessings, Ananda was finally able to then cut through the Maras, the obstacles of the Maras, and based on the Srangama Samadhi and mantra. So all of the other things, in fact, are easy to work with compared to desire. Especially for monastics, it is very difficult to work with desire. Therefore, this kind of sutra for monastics is quite important as well, because we have to keep pure precepts and long for only liberation. Unlike the mundane beings who are tortured by desire all day long. Even for these kind of people who are tortured by desire, then they can be liberated by the Srangama Samadhi. If desire can be worked with and can be cut through, then the other afflictions are no longer an obstacle. So Ananda was starving at that time, and he held his bow, went door to door, one by one, and in a nearby town. And in his mind, he was thinking that he wanted to go there door by door. In fact, he said that he intended to call the first on the donor who had not given food to a monk on that day. In the Chinese version, what it means is that the Tan Yue, there was a word Tan Yue that's included over there, and Tan Yue represents the Sanskrit dana and means to give. And the second yue means to transcend. So the meaning of Dhanapati, as based on that transliteration, then is one who gives so that he can transcend birth and death. Buddhas, bodhisattvas, great arhats, the elders, lay practitioners, in fact, were all then received by Ananda, by the assembly. And then Ananda was thinking that all of those people have made offering to the great to the assembly. Therefore, Ananda thought that he should be the one to receive the teachings, receive the meal or alms from someone who had not given food to monks on that day. And he thought that whomsoever he met, he would receive the food. He would receive from door to door, and he's not going to make any discrimination from one to the other. He's not going to make a differentiation of the noble ones, virtual ones, or an outcast. So he thought that he would go one by one, and he's not going to differentiate what food is better and what is worse, and what is pure, what is not pure, what is noble, what is the royal family, what is the Kshatriya family, what is the family of the outcast, and he's not going to make any of those kind of differentiations. He's going to only then equally and compassionately to receive whatever alms that they would give to him. And he made an aspiration. What kind of aspiration then? He said that in his practice of universal compassion, he did not especially choose a poor man as his patron. He wanted to help all living beings to earn countless merits. And he wanted to help all living beings to earn countless merit. For he had seen, over here it said that he wanted to help all living beings. According to the Tibetan version, it says that he wanted to then help all the donors. I think in terms of explaining the literary meaning, then it's easier to explain it in such a way, because not all living beings is a little difficult for all living beings to make offering to him. But if it is that he wanted to help the donors to earn countless merits, then it is easier to understand. He could make such aspiration. In his heart, he understood that the reason of making such aspiration is he saw the Buddha scold Shubudi and Mahakashyapa, who, though being arhats, could not realize universal mind or equanimity when begging for alms. he witnessed how the Buddha scolded Shupati and Mahakashapa, because Shupati wanted to eradicate the stinginess that is usually common in the rich families. Therefore, he specifically went to the rich families to beg for alms. And Mahakashapa already, he was the one who practiced ascetic practices, and he then wanted to accumulate merit for all the poor ones. Therefore, he always went to the poor ones to beg for alms. And then the Buddha scolded both of them. The Buddha said that, why do you do that? Shupati is just too extreme. He knows all the big bosses and all the famous and rich ones. Some practitioners nowadays, they also do that. If someone who has money and who has fame, then they're treated well. And for those ones who do not have any of those, then they're not treated well. Such as Mahakashapa always then despised those who are rich and famous, but favored those who are poor. In Chinese mainland, in places where it's rather poor and not developed, lots of great masters don't really go there. So I think they must be learning from Shupati rather than Mahakashapa. According to collected commentaries of the discourse on the stages of yogic practice, where it says that deluded beings are attached to delicious food, thus they prefer the rich than the poor to beg for food. The compassion of Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas is limited, so they beg for food from the poor rather than the rich. Great bodhisattvas are free from attachment, and their compassion is limitless. They are devoid of all the narrowness, and they do not differentiate the poor from the rich. Thus, their way to beg for food is named as begging from door to door. So they do not differentiate. For mundane beings, in fact, the mundane beings would treat the ones who are famous and rich really well. And they're great practitioners. The great practitioners, they feel that all the money and wealth, and those are the sources and roots of all the afflictions. Therefore, they would prefer to live in a life that is rather simple and quite similar to those of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. So they would then try to be apart from those famous and rich people. But usually what people would see the Buddhas is that the Buddhists, in fact, they would judge the Buddhists based on the prerequisites of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. But the great bodhisattvas are not like that at all. Jamyam Khyentse Wangpo, who stayed and lived in a great palace, a beautiful palace, and he had such great merit to do so. And then at that time, there are people who are practitioners who would slander him. Although for such kind of practitioners, maybe they have lots of desire and lots of the three afflictions in their heart, although they may live in a rather simple lifestyle and a situation, but their three poisons are far more surpassed than those who are great practitioners living in a palace. It is said that the unusual actions of Bodhisattva and Nagarjuna's view, by the uncommon actions as practiced, by Khenpo Sahur and the view and upholding the view of Nagarjuna and practice in the way that is in accord with the Shravakas and the Pratika Buddhas. That is the best way of that is the best practice of the Nyingma school. So Ananda was very much admired the Buddha's teaching, and he then practiced according to the Tathagata's teaching. And eliminated all his doubts and suspicions in this respect. Over here, it doesn't mean that eliminate the poor or the rich family. Rather, it means that he eliminate his doubts and suspicion and remain in equanimity. To remain in such kind of equanimity. And eliminate others' doubts as well, such as some families may feel that why do this group of people always come here? And if this assembly always go to rich families, and then poor families would also feel that why would this group of Shramanas always go to rich families but not poor? So, from the education of the Buddhism, in fact, it is stated that the rich ones who have made great contribution to the Dharma, in fact, those group of people should not be ignored. Unlike how the rich people are regarded as rather the group of people that they should avoid according to Shravakas. So it should not be on any kind of extremes. You should not ignore the ones who are rich and nor the ones who are poor. And everything should be done according to the different kind of a situation. You should then remain equanimity with skillfulness. So, when Ananda reached the town's gate, in fact, it is not only the town's gate. There was usually a river that circulates around the town to by means of protecting the town. And then he walked slowly, adjusting his mien to the rules of discipline. Usually, if one enters into a town, then for monastics, they uphold certain rules to adjust their clothing and their demeanor, as well as their actions, their walks, and it has to be very dignified, where would arouse the kind of respect and veneration from other people. So Ananda then uphold such kind of discipline and such kind of demeanor to beg for alms. According to Master Zhenjian, he said that he then specifically and especially give rose to right mindfulness and double his attention to appropriate actions. And he purposely wanted to uphold such kind of demeanor so that other people won't view him and won't have wrong views towards him. And then he came to a house of prostitute, a brothel. And then that's where he met the mother from the Matangi caste. In fact, there was a mother and a daughter, and then first he met the mother. In fact, the daughter of this low caste woman, the Matangi woman, she had been the wife of Ananda for 500 lifetimes. And this time, upon seeing Ananda, she had a great desire for Ananda. And the mother didn't really want to lure Ananda in to marry her daughter. And at first, the mother doesn't want to do it because she felt she had lots of veneration towards Ananda as well. But she couldn't. But the daughter kept on begging the mother, and she couldn't refuse her anymore. And the mother told the daughter, saying that there are two kinds of people that I cannot control by this Kapila magic. And that is, first of all, it is the Buddha, and the second of all is the person who is dead. So the daughter kept on begging the mother to give the spell to Ananda so that Ananda would agree to marry her. Nowadays, there's the movie that is shown in the movie. I think the profound meaning of the sutra was not really shown, but some parts were rather too worldly, but some parts I think it could really give some insights of our contemplation. Therefore, at that time, the mother then used the means of Kapila magic. So Kapila is a Kapila religion, that is a heretic religion where they would practice the Brahmin heavens practice, and they received this Kapila magic, the Kapila mantra. And by using such magic, the mother then draw Ananda close to her central body on the mat, and so that he was on the verge of breaking the rule of his pure precept. Shall we play the short clip?
瑞体，告诉妈妈，你是不是有心上人了？他是哪个种姓的后人？
他高贵、神圣，却又和我平等无别。
阿难达尊者。 这怎么可能？他是不大的堂弟，贴身侍者，连国王都要尊敬他、信仰他。我怎么能劝他来当你的丈夫呢？你怎么能生出要嫁给他这样罪恶深重的念头呢？
既然妈妈不愿意成全，我现在就一死了结了吧！
你住手！甚是荒唐！ 我的好孩子，你可是妈妈唯一的骨肉。你现在这么做，妈妈会更加痛不欲生的。
妈妈，求您就成全我。
可是，安南达跟不跟你成亲，不是我们能够决定的。我实在是想不明白，我用什么样的方法能让一个出家人和你成亲？这太荒唐了。
All right, that's it.
妈妈，你不是经常说我们马大嘎家族世代传承一个威力无比的金发仙咒吗？
Originally, I think they have a longer video, but I think we're running out of time, so we're not going to play the rest of the video anymore. And then at that time, the Tathagata knew that Ananda was then lured by this Kapila magic. Originally, the Buddha was supposed to give the teaching of the Dharma and then dedicate the merit. But then, instead of doing all of that, the Buddha stood up and sent out from the top of, and then he then left because he perceived that Ananda was in trouble. So at that time, all the cabinets, all the great elders and the kings, they all followed the Buddha because they had no idea what happened. They felt that what's the problem? The Buddha has not taught the Dharma yet. They wished to hear about the essentials of the Dharma, but they had not. Therefore, they followed the Buddha, and then the Buddha sent out from the top of his head a bright and triumphant, multicolored light within which appeared a transformation Buddha seated with crossed legs on a 1,000-petaled lotus. In fact, he chanted this transcendental mantra at that time, mantra that has 9 syllables. I will provide that syllable to you later, the mantra syllables to you later. And then all of the people heard this mantra. And the Buddha then ordered Manjushri to use this mantra to overcome the Kapila magic and to bring Ananda with Matangi to the vihara. So Ananda at that time, Manjushri went to where Ananda was and then brought as well as carrot. So according to Tibetan language, it means that Manjushri then brought Ananda and Matangi to the vihara to roped them together and brought them back. No, in fact, he didn't, but he brought them back. According and with the transcendental mantra, based on the blessings and power of transcendental mantra, Ananda did not break his vow, did not break his precept, and both Ananda and the Matangi woman were brought back to the Buddha. And at that time, according to a Matangi woman's sutra, or the Buddha's discourse to Matangi woman, it says that when the Matangi Buddha came to the Buddha, then the Buddha asked, if you want to marry to Ananda, then you should shave off your hair, because look at Ananda, he shaved off his hair, then you should do the same. Can you do that? And then Matangi woman said, sure, I can do that. And then Matangi woman went back to her mother and asked her mother to shave off her hair. And her mother was extremely upset and said that this is our tradition to keep long hair. Why do you want to shave it off? I can find a much more rich and much more famous man for you to marry to. Why do you want to shave off your hair? And then Matangi continuously to beg for her mother that please shave off my hair, because if you don't do that, I can't marry to Ananda, I will die. Just like how the mundane worldly people in China would say that if I were alive, I am your person. If I were dead, then I am your ghost. And Matangi then, after shaved off her hair by her mother, she came back to the Tathagata and begged the Tathagata again, saying that now I've shaved off my hair, can I please get married to Ananda and live with him? And then the Buddha asked, so what do you like about Ananda? And Masangi started saying, I like his nose, his eyes, his mouth, his ears, his voice, his demeanor. I like everything about him. And then the Buddha said that, well, inside the eye there's there are tears, and out of the nose there are there are mucus, and out of the mouth there are saliva, and out of ears there are all the different kinds of things within the body of Ananda. Then what's the point of living with Ananda that is really full of defilements and dirts? And upon contemplating on this, Masangi understood what this body's truth is, and right away he attained arhathood. Lots of disciples were extremely surprised and said that this woman had lots of desire and had lots of grasping towards Ananda. How did she get arhathood right away? And then the Buddha replied, saying that in fact Ananda and Masangi had been spouses for 500 lifetimes, and they were deeply in love with each other for 500, very much attached to each other for 500 lifetimes. And this time, because they finally have such opportunity to listen to the supreme teaching of selflessness, and therefore they both attained realization. And then at that time, Masangi, upon attaining arhathood, she felt extremely embarrassed and kneeled down in front of the Buddha, saying that you are the lamp in the darkness, you are the ship that carries me to the other shore, and you are the one who carries me who is like a blind. So now I am really grateful that I finally received and finally stepped onto the path of the Dharma. In fact, Shrangama Sutra had shown the attachment that mundane beings have towards one another. Especially the worldly beings are fettered by desire, not having one moment of freedom, but due to and because of the power of the transcendental mantra of Shrangama mantra, then you'll be able to unfetter yourself. And this is the profound meaning that's taught in this sutra.